Hi everyone, Dr. Colayco here. I want to start by thanking those of you who engaged with my last video on anti-Asian hate crimes, and especially to those of you who shared and amplified the post and those who pledged to really stand up against racist comments and jokes in your social circles. When we engage in conversations like this, it's really important to learn directly from people who are of the community that's being harmed. And so I encourage you to continue listening to and learning from other Asian Americans on this topic. Know that we're not a monolith. I don't speak for all Asians. I don't even speak for all Filipinos. And I only speak from my own lived experience as an individual. So don't rely on a single story. Get out there, follow more accounts. I've linked already in previous posts to some great accounts that provide a lot of value and insights. So let's all continue on this learning journey together. So with that, I promised you a video in which I would compare the different brands of coronavirus vaccines. So today I'm going to focus on the Johnson & Johnson Janssen vaccine as well as the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccines. So I want to give a big shout out to our intern pharmacist, Pinkle Mystery, who compiled a lot of this information and summarized it to make this video possible. So there's some differences between the vaccine brands. So when it comes to the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines, which I've discussed at length in previous videos, these are both around 94 to 95% effective in preventing symptomatic COVID disease. And each of these requires 2 doses. Pfizer in particular requires being frozen at an ultra cold temperature. So this requires a very special freezer to keep it stable over the long term. So when it comes to the Johnson & Johnson Janssen vaccine, and now this information is based on press release only. They haven't yet released their peer-reviewed phase 3 trial results. So those are yet to be published. But based on what we know, at least from the press releases, we know the JNJ vaccine is overall 66% effective in preventing moderate to severe COVID-19. And it's actually 100% effective in preventing hospitalizations and deaths. So that's really the endpoint that most of us want to avoid, is hospitalization and death. Of course, it's great if we don't even get sick in the first place, and that's what we mean by symptomatic COVID. When you break it down by region, the J&J vaccine is 72% effective in the US, 66% effective in Latin America, and 57% effective in South Africa. So remember, South Africa is the region where we have one of the new variants of coronaviruses that have come up, that we still have some effectiveness. You know, these vaccines are still somewhat effective against it, but not quite as effective compared with the old variants. So, and we'll have a separate discussion on these new variants and what that means in a separate discussion. Overall, for the J&J vaccine, no significant safety events. Overall, very well tolerated. So similar to the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines based on these press releases. We'll see the details of this in the upcoming publications. And the clinical trials included over 43,000 participants, and they were quite racially diverse. So similar to the Pfizer and the Moderna trials, where they intentionally recruited racial minorities or people of color to be included in these trials, which is very important. One of the biggest advantages of the J&J vaccine is that it's 1 dose. So that's huge because you don't have to worry about coming back for that second dose. And that can be a big barrier for a lot of people. So I'm thinking about in Kern County, California, where we practice, we have many migrant workers who work in the farms, for example. Some of them travel from one county to another, depending on the seasonality of the crops that need to be harvested at any given time during the year. And think about the logistics of how we're distributing these vaccines. It's county by county. So each county public health department is responsible for determining who is eligible to get vaccines at any given moment. at the moment, just in California alone, some counties have opened it up to farm workers. Some counties have not. Some counties are still catching up with the demand for healthcare workers and elders over age 65. So that creates a complication. You know, imagine if you're traveling, you get your first dose in a county where you're authorized to receive it, and then you move to a county where you're not, you know, you're not yet on the list of eligible people to get it. So that can make things complicated. So in that specific example, I can see how getting a one-dose vaccine can be a big advantage. That's just one example. Also, another advantage of the J&J vaccine is you can store it in the refrigerator for a longer period of time. Whereas the Pfizer vaccine, for instance, you have to keep it at that ultra cold frozen temperature over the long term. And so imagine how this also complicates logistics when you're getting to rural areas or thinking on a more global level. We have to meet the demand to vaccinate billions of people in multiple countries. So having longer stability in the fridge or in a cooler, for example, is going to be a big advantage for getting it out to multiple countries and multiple rural areas around the world. So that's the high level on the J&J Janssen vaccine. Now, the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine. So this has been authorized in the United Kingdom and India and several other countries now for a couple months now. And the peer-reviewed phase 3 trial data on the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine is based on 2 standard doses. So based on the 2 standard doses, this vaccine is 62% effective against symptomatic COVID. This analysis was based on about 11,000 participants, and there's ongoing analyses going on to look at how effective it is using different dosing regimens. So they're looking at what is the difference in effectiveness if we make it a longer time interval between the 2 doses. So waiting longer in between dose number 1 and dose number 2, for example. And what is the effectiveness if we do a low dose followed by a standard dose? And what is the effectiveness if we try maybe just a single dose? So kind of just hot off the presses, there's been some top line or general data released on these different dosing regimens. These have not yet been peer reviewed, so, you know, kind of take it with a grain of salt. But what they're finding is that based on this trial population that we're talking about, those that got their 2 doses more than 12 weeks apart tended to have a little bit higher effectiveness. So the effectiveness looks like it's around 82% when you space the doses out by more than 12 weeks. Also, those who happened to receive a low dose followed by a standard dose, they were showing about an 80% effectiveness. And then those who got just a single dose, they had about 76% effectiveness with the AstraZeneca vaccine. So this is, you know, the information we have now. We expect that we'll have more details, you know, in the coming weeks and months. So I would imagine this may change possibly what the, you know, approved or recommended dose regimen looks like. But yeah, for now, that's what we know in terms of the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine. Also very well tolerated, very safe, just like the other vaccines as well. Some of the limitations of the clinical trial data that we have that's been published is that the majority of the clinical trial participants were white and under the age of 55. So this may limit how we interpret the data for people of color and for elders over the age of 55. So specifically, you know, there's biological factors in elders in which their immune systems are not as responsive compared with younger patients. And when we're talking about people of color, what the issue is, it's not biological, but it's social factors. So it's systemic racism factors that may limit accessibility to high quality healthcare, preventive care that contribute to chronic diseases, you know, income differences, and kind of other social factors involved. So that's kind of the limitation, at least of the clinical trial participants. But we are getting, some real life data from people who are getting the vaccine at the moment, since it's already authorized for use in several countries. So as more information is released, we'll know more. So that's it as far as the comparison of the J&J and the AstraZeneca vaccines compared with the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines. In my next video, I'm going to talk about CoronaVac, which is the vaccine developed by Sinovac, the company based in China, as well as the Sputnik vaccine developed in Russia. So stay tuned for that.